The ocean had a king 190 million years ago, and that creature was just the size of a dolphin. But it still kept everyone else in fear. A fossil collector found its relics in the rock at England's famous Jurassic Coast near a place called Golden Cap in Dorset back in 2001. For centuries before that day, people just walked over it and never noticed this treasure. Then, it traveled all the way to a museum in Ontario, Canada. But it was still there until, in late 2025, scientists realized they weren't looking at just another sea reptile, but at something unique, the only known specimen of its species. The find received a nickname, the sword dragon of Dorset, and got the attention of the scientific world. Ichthyosaurus, the group this animal belongs to, spent their lives in the ocean, but they don't have much in common with fish. Think of them as the marine equivalent of dinosaurs' cousins. For millions of years, they ruled the seas the way sharks and whales dominate today. But the sword dragon didn't have much in common with those bad guys. This creature stretched just about 10 feet long and had a pretty unusual appearance. Many ichthyosaurs had thick skulls and strong jaws, which were just perfect for crushing prey. Instead, evolution gave our guy an incredibly long, narrow snout attached to a high-speed body. Researchers think it used that snout to slash through schools of fish and squid and to stun or slice prey before swallowing it. And the eyes of our sword dragon worked like giant camera lenses. They pulled in every bit of light available, so the animal could see in places where most predators would be almost blind. And in the ocean, where sunlight doesn't travel very far underwater, it's a huge advantage. Fish, squid, and other prey drifted through the gloom, thinking they had some cover from danger, and our dragon could spot them without a problem. It also had a pretty unusual skull. Most animals, including us humans, have a small bone near the nostril area called the lacrimal bone. Normally, it's nothing special. But on the sword dragon, it had odd little prong-like projections sticking out from it, something paleontologists had never seen on any other ichthyosaur before. In paleontology, those tiny details are everything. They become clues that tell scientists they're not looking at a completely new species that lived millions of years ago. The sword dragon skeleton survived in almost perfect shape and preserved its three-dimensional form, not flattened like many other fossils. Scientists even think traces of the creature's last meal still sit inside its remains. So, one moment this animal hunted fish in Jurassic waters, and the next moment it froze in time, with its final lunch locked inside stone for 190 million years. The story got even more interesting once scientists began studying the bones carefully. Some limb bones and teeth have strange deformities, which means the animal suffered injuries or disease while it lived. The skull also has bite marks from a much larger predator, probably another ichthyosaur. That beast likely delivered the final blow. But the biggest reason scientists care about this animal so much is that it fills a massive gap in the fossil record. Fossils from the time period when it lived, around 193 to 184 million years ago, show up very rarely. Before this discovery, paleontologists saw two completely different groups of ichthyosaurs in the fossil record: older ones before this period and newer ones after it. But no one knew exactly when or how that change happened. So, the sword dragon enters the story like a missing puzzle piece. This creature looked more closely related to later species that appeared millions of years afterward. That means the big evolutionary shift in ichthyosaurs likely started earlier than scientists thought. Now, let's leave the ocean and jump to a completely different landscape. One that once baked under the brutal sun of the Sahara. Around 95 million years ago, a predator walked there that looked just as strange as the sword dragon, but it chased prey on land and in rivers instead of the sea. The scientists who led the discovery described this animal as a hell heron. It stretched as long as a school bus and weighed several tons. Its skull had long crocodile-like jaws filled with conical teeth, so it could easily grip slippery fish for lunch. But the really weird part was a crest on its head shaped like a curved blade, a scimitar. It looked so unusual that scientists didn't even recognize the species when they first uncovered the bones in 2019. They only understood what they had after they returned to the site in 2022 and collected more fossils. Researchers find spinosaurs in rocks that formed near ancient coastlines, which clearly shows us that those creatures took their food from the sea. But this one turned up hundreds of miles from any prehistoric sea. The land around it once had forests and rivers instead of desert dunes. That means this giant predator probably went into freshwater ecosystems to look for food there, instead of coastal waters. So it looks like this massive dinosaur was wading through water up to 6.5 feet deep, standing on sturdy legs while scanning the surface for fish. Instead of diving like a crocodile, it likely waited patiently and then snapped its jaws shut in a lightning-fast strike. More than 200 million years ago, another strange survivor swam through freshwater lakes and slow-moving rivers in what is now Zimbabwe, an extinct species of lungfish. Unlike most fish, lungfish can actually breathe air. They have organs that function like primitive lungs, which allows them to gulp oxygen directly from the atmosphere when water becomes too stagnant or low in oxygen. In a way, they live between two worlds, part fish, part early experiment in the transition toward land animals. And that superpower makes lungfish really important to scientists. They are the closest living relatives to the ancient ancestors of all four-limbed animals. There used to be a gap in our knowledge of these creatures, but the new discovery helped fill it. Now we know that many lungfish may be more closely related than they used to think, and scientists can now better understand how these creatures survived for hundreds of millions of years. In a way, lungfish are one of evolution's masterpieces. This ancient blueprint kept working when entire worlds of species were born and vanished around them. Now let's travel even further back in time, way before dinosaurs ruled the planet. Around 275 million years ago, another bizarre creature swam through freshwater lakes in what is now Brazil. Researchers discovered the species from 9 fossilized lower jaws, each about 6 inches long. Instead of pointing upward like normal teeth, this creature's teeth stuck out sideways. Every single jaw had the same strange design, which proved the twist wasn't a mistake, but the way the animal evolved. The inside surface of the jaw had tiny tooth-like bumps called denticles. These structures formed a grinding surface, so the creature had its own built-in food processor. Scientists think it used that unusual mouth to chew small invertebrates, or maybe even plant material. That's a pretty unusual diet for an animal whose close relatives were mostly carnivores. And speaking of its family, this bizarre creature belonged to an extremely ancient lineage called stem tetrapods. Those were early four-limbed vertebrates that gave rise to modern reptiles, birds, mammals, and amphibians. By the time Tankia lived, most of those early lineages had already disappeared. Yet this one somehow survived, and newer, more modern animals evolved around it. Scientists call this kind of animal a living fossil. When researchers analyzed the fossils, they made the conclusion that this mysterious creature grew up to about 3 feet long and probably resembled a salamander with a longer snout. It swam through lakes in a world where the continents still formed the giant supercontinent Gondwana. This discovery is also important because it helps scientists understand how ancient ecosystems functioned and which animals filled different roles in those early communities. They were digging a well when they hit something that made them stop mid-swing. Their shovels struck stone, and as they cleared the dirt away, the farmers saw blocks, lined up like bricks in a fortress wall. It happened in Texas in 1852. But to this day, there's no single explanation for something that looks like a secret buried city beneath quiet streets and front lawns. The diggers who found the well said that the structure stretched for miles. In some places, it dropped dozens of feet below the surface. The stones looked strangely orderly, almost like someone had stacked them, and in certain places, the shapes even formed arches. Other sections looked like windows or steps climbing upward. Before long, people started calling it the Great Wall of Texas, and the story spread quickly. Farmers, builders, and curious locals all grabbed shovels and started digging around, hoping to figure out what it really was. And that's when they noticed that the blocks seemed separated by seams that looked suspiciously like mortar. It was really hard to believe that nature could stack limestone into right angles and parallel lines like this. Then, things got even stranger. In 1886, a local newspaper wrote about a massive petrified skull found near the wall. They also mentioned underground chambers, lost rooms beneath Texas soil, and relics of something powerful and old. And then, almost as quickly as it appeared, the story vanished from print. There were no follow-up articles, no skull preserved in a museum, no official investigation that anyone could point to. It was as if the story had quietly slipped out of existence. People got even more intrigued and wanted to know if someone had suppressed all the info about the find on purpose. Someone suggested that some powerful institutions had quietly removed artifacts. Over time, theories piled up. Lost civilizations, ancient giants, even a North American counterpart to the Great Pyramid. But then, modern science stepped in with drilling rigs. Geologists drilled deep into the formation and pulled out samples of the rock. Then, they ran paleomagnetic tests. When rocks form, tiny magnetic minerals inside them line up with Earth's magnetic field at that moment, almost like microscopic compass needles frozen in place. If workers had cut these blocks somewhere else, maybe dug them out of a quarry, and then transported and assembled them into a wall, the magnetic patterns inside the rocks would have pointed in different directions. Each block would carry the signature of the place where it originally formed, but every sample had the same magnetic orientation, which means the stone formed exactly where it sits today. Researchers figured out the wall was made of rare limestone. This material can fracture in surprisingly straight lines as it hardens underground. Over long periods, erosion opens up those fractures, and they can look exactly like human-made walls. It's like mud. When it dries, it splits into neat geometric patterns. Now imagine the same process happening underground, slowly over millions of years on a much larger scale. Today, the scientists are sure that the rock wall formation developed naturally. It only seems constructed by humans. Recently, a family whose ancestors were early rock wall settlers donated a piece of land to the city that has the original site where the wall was excavated. And because the interest in the place lives on, the city authorities plan to make the original wall accessible to the public. The rock wall isn't alone. In 1968, 3 divers spotted large rectangular limestone blocks near North Bimini in the Bahamas. The blocks were in a straight line stretching about a half a mile. Divers called it the Bimini Road. It consists of massive angular blocks of limestone. Some of those blocks are up to 13 feet long. Many of the blocks look like they once had right-angled corners, as if someone cut them and placed them there with purpose. The 3 divers found this construction when the world buzzed with interest in Atlantis. So headlines immediately connected the dots and were seriously asking whether this could be the first physical trace of Plato's legendary civilization. We still don't have any archaeological evidence to confirm it actually existed, but the timing and the shape of the Bimini stones made many people believe that was it. But then, geologists explained that beach rock forms when sand, shell fragments, and other coastal sediments cement together in warm, shallow water. The Bimini blocks consist of small mud pellets, grains of sand, shell pieces, remains of tiny single-celled marine organisms, and fragments of algae. Over time, chemical reactions bound these materials into solid limestone sheets. Natural fractures split the sheets into rectangular blocks. As sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, water gradually submerged the formation. Waves and currents eroded the sand beneath parts of it and made some blocks look slightly elevated or recessed. Then, researchers did radiocarbon dating on rock samples, shells embedded with them, and the carbonate cement holding everything together. That's how they found out that the stones were roughly 2,000 years old. It's way after Atlantis' supposed demise 12,000 years ago. So no, the Bimini Road doesn't lead to Atlantis. But it helped scientists better understand how coastlines evolve, how sediment hardens, and how rising seas reshape continents. There's another mysterious structure that might have to do with Atlantis. Meet the Eye of the Sahara, or more officially, the Richat structure in Mauritania. From space, it looks like a 25-mile-wide bullseye carved into the desert. Concentric rings ripple outward like someone dropped a cosmic pebble. People who saw it first thought it was a spot left by a meteor impact. And a new theory links it to Atlantis. They say it looks exactly how Plato described it, with a center island with 3 rings of water and 3 rings of land around it. The Eye of the Sahara sits totally dry right now, but imagine if you dropped it down to sea level. Ocean water would rush in and fill those dips, and boom, you get something that looks a whole lot like Plato's famous city. On top of that, the size seems pretty close. Plato said the main part of Atlantis measured about 11 miles across, and the Richat structure measures roughly 13 miles wide. But wait, Atlantis famously sank into the ocean, so for this to work, the eye had to sit right at sea level a long time ago. The fans of this idea claim that this whole chunk of northwest Africa slowly pushed upward over the last 11,000 years. They say it sat right at the ocean's edge way back around 9,600 BCE, which is exactly when Plato's story takes place. To back this up, they point out tons of salt inside the rings in satellite pictures, saying this proves ocean water used to sit right there. They also see sand all around the eye that looks like a giant wave washed over it. A huge wave like that would totally wipe out any city sitting there, just like the wave that supposedly sank Atlantis. It all sounds pretty convincing, but actual scientists and historians totally disagree. Because when you look closely, the facts just fall apart. Yes, the eye has 3 clear ridges, but if you measure all 3, the whole thing stretches way bigger than 13 miles. On the flip side, if you only measure out to 13 miles, you have to leave out the 3rd ridge entirely. So it doesn't actually match Plato's description perfectly, since you simply can't have it both ways. Modern satellite images show that the eye formed from uplifted rock layers that were pushed upward by molten material beneath the surface. Wind and water erosion then peeled back those layers like an onion over at least 100 million years. The oldest rocks sit in the center. Younger layers ring outward. It's a geological dome, not a crater, not a city. Inside the structure, scientists found igneous rocks, hardened magma, and sedimentary layers twisted by immense pressure. Hot water chemically changed the rocks and left additional signatures. Ancient stone tools also scatter across the region, showing that early humans once passed through. This site is now among the most significant geological heritage locations on Earth.
Archaeologists in Panama kept finding chiefs covered in gold under a plain sunburned field. Weird enough, then they found chief regalia so small it could only belong to a child. That discovery shifted the interpretation of the site. El Caño was no longer just a rich ceremonial site. It looked more like a place where power could pass from one generation to the next. And now, a newly opened chamber there has expanded that picture. El Caño stands apart from the usual ancient gold story. The newest chamber, dated to around AD 800 to 1000, didn't just produce shiny artifacts. It added another piece to a much larger pattern. Archaeologists found pottery, gold ornaments, and a central high-status person marked out by where the gold was placed. This was not random wealth in the dirt. It was a public statement about rank. The objects themselves are vivid. 2 bracelets, 2 earrings, pectoral ornaments decorated with bats and crocodiles. Those are not the kind of items someone tosses in casually. They were chosen to say something. In a world with no billboards, no spotlights, and no giant stone inscriptions, gold did the talking. It told everyone exactly who mattered most in that chamber. The location makes this even more striking. Not Egypt, not Peru, not some famous archaeological landscape packed with giant ruins, central Panama. Historically, this region was often treated as the place between the main acts of the ancient Americas, wedged between the Maya to the north and the great Andean cultures to the south. El Caño repeatedly challenges that older view. That old assumption existed for a reason. This part of Panama does not hit you like a stone-built empire. There's no skyline of huge temples, no carved dynastic walls, No dramatic ruin screaming a powerful society was here. In tropical Central America, a lot of everyday life was built in materials that don't age gracefully. Wood, thatch, fibers, skin, feathers. Most of it simply doesn't stick around for 1,000 years. So when gold survives, it becomes one of the loudest voices left. And El Caño did not give up that voice quickly. Julia Mayo's team began geophysical surveys there in 2005. By 2010, they had dug a pit about 16 feet deep and uncovered a chief covered in gold. Then the site kept escalating. More ornaments appeared. More chambers turned up. More evidence started linking this field to a whole ceremonial landscape. This was not a lucky weekend dig. It was years of slow, patient work, turning a quiet pasture into one of the biggest archaeological stories in Panama. The contrast is striking from the surface. El Caño looks ordinary, the kind of place where you'd expect grass, cattle, and heat, not dynasties. But under that ordinary ground, archaeologists found symbols of authority designed to be seen from a distance. Polished gold would have caught the harsh sunlight. Chest ornaments likely flashed when a leader moved. Animal imagery, bats, crocodiles, and other powerful creatures turned jewelry into a visual language of authority. This was status you could spot instantly, and the newest chamber matters because it is not standing alone. Mayo said the site has produced 9 similar chambers and that this was a place where elite individuals were laid to rest for about 200 years. This finding expands the interpretation of the site. One rich chamber is interesting. A ceremonial resting ground used by powerful people across multiple generations suggests something else entirely. It begins to resemble a long-running system. You can see that system even more clearly in another major El Caño find from 2024. Archaeologists uncovered the shared chamber of an important Cocle lord buried around 750 to 800 CE. Inside were gold ornaments, ceramic objects, bells, skirts, and a set of flutes. The team dubbed him the Lord of the Flutes, which sounds almost legendary until you remember this is not a myth. It's a real person from a real ceremonial tradition found in the same site. The scale grows even larger around that burial. Researchers found many other individuals placed in the same setting. Reports said the total could reach more than 30 people. At that point, you are no longer looking at one important person with a collection of objects. You are looking at an event, a choreographed display, a message to everyone watching that this leader stood at the center of a much bigger social order. This interpretation is supported by research. A 2020 study of El Caño's multiple chambers found the same basic pattern again and again. One highest status individual in each other, people arranged around that central figure, and a strong sense that the whole composition represented social order. The authors also concluded that some of these final ceremonies involved very harsh ritual practices. The layout itself was part of the performance of power. Now go back to the child-sized regalia, because that might be the strangest clue of all. One of Mayo's earlier breakthroughs came when she realized a set of tiny gold objects was too small for an adult. They appear to have belonged to a baby adorned like a chief. Later, the team found gold arm cuffs on the skeleton of a 12-year-old boy. Both finds point in the same direction. Status here may not have been something a person earned late in life. It may have started at birth. That implication is significant. If rank passed from father to son, then El Caño was not showing us a few isolated leaders. It was revealing a hereditary power system. That means established families, succession, and rules strong enough for an entire community to recognize them. Gold-working specialists had to exist, ceremonial knowledge had to be preserved, labor had to be organized. These were not loose little villages improvising everything as they went. This was structure. It also explains why El Caño feels bigger than a treasure story. Gold draws attention first. The real subject is political sophistication. The objects are only useful because of what they reveal: hierarchy, ceremony, inherited authority, and a leadership class that could stage power in a way everyone understood. Gold is what catches your eye first. The social system is what keeps the site interesting once the shine wears off. There is another reason El Caño matters so much. Less than 2 miles away sits Sitio Conte, the older Panamanian site that had long provided the main evidence for this gold-rich tradition. For years, Sitio Conte was the big reference point. Then El Caño started turning up its own chiefs, its own ornaments, its own ceremonial patterns. Suddenly, this was not one isolated hotspot. It was a broader cultural world, hiding in plain sight across the same landscape. Once you imagine that world, El Caño becomes incredibly visual. No giant stone monuments. Fine, the ceremony can still feel huge. Flutes playing, bells moving, gold breastplates flashing, beads sewn into clothing, animal symbols broadcasting lineage and rank. One early chief found at El Caño wore gold breastplates, arm cuffs, a bracelet of bells, a belt of hollow gold beads, and more than 2,000 tiny gold spheres arranged as if sewn onto a sash. That is not subtle fashion. That is ceremonial theater. Imagine one of these final ceremonies. A leader is placed at the center. Gold catches the light. Music carries across the field. Companions are arranged with strict meaning. Everyone present can read the scene without a single written word. This person held the highest place. These families mattered. This order continues even now. The point was not private grief. The point was public memory and public hierarchy. That is why El Caño changes the history of Panama in a very specific way. It does not just add one more archaeological attraction to the map, it shows that central Panama had its own powerful chiefs, its own ceremonial specialists, its own symbols of rank, and probably its own dynastic lines. This region was not just absorbing importance from bigger neighbors, it was generating its own, and the site is still making that point clearer. El Caño has already revealed multiple elite chambers across years of excavation, and each new one expands the story. So the key discovery here is not a bracelet, or an earring, or even a chamber filled with gold. It is the realization that an ordinary Panamanian field was hiding a cemetery of rulers and clues to a forgotten power system that had been there the whole time, just waiting for someone to look deeper.
40,000 years ago, someone scratched a few tiny lines and dots onto a piece of bone, and that little mark might be the oldest hard drive humanity ever created. Scientists now believe those Ice Age people weren't just doodling, but recording real information, structured, organized, repeatable data. And this discovery completely shifts the timeline of human intelligence. For decades, archaeologists kept finding strange symbols carved into Stone Age tools and sculptures. Those were simple shapes like crosses, dots, short lines, and tiny notches cut into bone or ivory. Explorers kept finding them in caves across Europe, including Germany, France, and Spain. They showed up on carved animal figurines, tools, and ornaments. Archaeologists dated them to be about 34,000 to 45,000 years old. That means people created these symbols during the Ice Age, when glaciers covered huge chunks of the planet, and mammoths still wandered the plains. For a long time, researchers believed these signs meant nothing in particular, maybe decorations, maybe tribal art. But a new computational study led by a linguist and an archaeologist showed it was more about data than decoration. The team analyzed more than 3,000 individual symbols carved into around 260 artifacts. They studied every mark and fed them into statistical models, the same type of mathematics researchers use to study language patterns or train artificial intelligence. The goal wasn't to translate the signs yet. Nobody knows exactly what they mean. Instead, the scientists looked at something called information density, which means how much meaningful data you can store in a sequence of symbols. When the researchers ran the numbers, they saw that the symbol sequences had almost the same information density as Proto-Cuneiform. That's the earliest writing system known from ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE. It was roughly 40,000 years later. So, some signs in these Ice Age carvings repeat again and again in predictable ways: cross, 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 line, line, dot. That repetition resembles early data encoding, where patterns repeat because they store structured information. The researchers also analyzed the entropy of the coded messages. Entropy measures how unpredictable a sequence is. High entropy means lots of possible combinations, like a complex password. Low entropy means predictable repetition, and it looks like the Ice Age symbol systems have entropy levels very close to early Proto-Cuneiform tablets. That means the amount of information those carvings could store roughly matches the earliest writing records from the first cities. It proves that humans didn't just suddenly invent writing out of nowhere 5,000 years ago. Instead, humans spent tens of thousands of years experimenting with symbolic encoding systems and gradually increased their complexity until true writing was finally invented. One of the most interesting examples of such a coded message comes from a cave in southwestern Germany. Archaeologists discovered a tiny mammoth figurine carved from mammoth tusk ivory, small enough to fit in your palm. There's a neat row of engraved crosses and dots running along its surface. Another object, called the adorant, is a thin ivory plate. Found in a different German cave, has a strange mythical creature that looks part human, part lion on it. The figure stretches upward like it's worshipping something, and across its body, someone carved rows of tiny dots and notches with careful spacing. Then there's the famous lion-human sculpture. If you look at the arm closely, you can see evenly spaced cuts along the limb. These marks seem intentional, deliberate, almost rhythmic. They look less like decoration and more like entries in a ledger. It makes those artifacts something like USB drives made of ivory. And because these ancient USB drives appear in different regions of Germany and in other parts of Europe, it could mean that Ice Age humans may have shared such symbolic messages across huge distances. Those hunter-gatherers living thousands of miles apart probably recognized the same patterns scratched into bone tools. Of course, scientists still don't know the exact meaning of these symbols. They could represent seasonal calendars, migration cycles, clan markers, or some concepts tied to rituals. So the most important discovery for now isn't the translation, but the structure of the signs that behave like a system. This coding system isn't the only proof that ancient minds invented complex systems long before modern technology arrived. There's a thick oval slab of limestone in a museum in the Netherlands. Archaeologists dug it up in the late 1800s and assumed it was some kind of Roman game board. The problem was that nobody could figure out the rules. The carved lines didn't match any known ancient game. Only in 2026, researchers finally solved the mystery with help from artificial intelligence. If you look at the stone closely, you can see that certain grooves on it are slightly deeper than others. It means that people slid pieces across those lines repeatedly, and the stone wore down over time. Conservation experts created extremely detailed 3D scans of the limestone surface to analyze those wear patterns. Those scans showed differences in depth smaller than a human hair. Every tiny groove became a clue about how players once moved their pieces. Then, the team brought in a special AI game simulation system designed to understand board games. They fed the system rules from about 100 historical games and asked it to test possibilities onto a digital copy of the Roman board. The AI played thousands of simulated matches against itself and tried different rule combinations each time. For every rule set, it tracked where the pieces moved and compared those paths to the wear patterns on the real stone. It repeated this process around 1,000 times per rule set until finally certain patterns started lining up perfectly. The system narrowed all the possibilities to a small group of related blocking games. In this type of strategy game, two players move pieces along fixed paths, trying to trap the opponent's pieces in corners or dead ends. If you've ever played tic-tac-toe or checkers, you already understand the basic idea. To control space, predict the opponent's next move, and close the trap. The simulations showed that the Romans most likely played this game with small tokens made of glass, bone, or pottery sliding along those carved grooves. And that discovery matters more than you might think. Historians used to believe blocking games appeared in early medieval Europe, centuries after the Roman Empire collapsed. But this limestone board showed them that such games existed nearly 1,000 years earlier. So, Roman players had strategy games that helped them develop forward planning, recognizing patterns, and thinking of different combinations and possibilities. Now let's travel even further back in time, long before Roman cities and writing of any kind. Our destination, Olduvai Gorge in northern Tanzania, one of the oldest important archaeological sites on Earth. In 2025, researchers studying the area found something unexpected in ancient sediments. It was a set of tools made from the limb bones of elephants and hippos. And these tools date back about 1.5 million years. Scientists found 27 bone tools, some nearly 15 inches long, shaped into sharp blades. Early humans most likely used them on animal carcasses or to process tough materials. At first glance, they seem simple, but it actually looks like the toolmakers shaped these bones using knapping, the same process used to chip stone tools. Knapping means striking a material carefully so that small flakes break away, gradually forming a sharp edge. Bone behaves very differently from stone. It contains collagen, which makes it slightly flexible and elastic. Hit the bone too hard and it shatters unpredictably. Hit it too softly and nothing happens. That means whoever made these tools understood how the material worked. They adapted their technique to shape bone without destroying it. Archaeologists believe Homo erectus, an early human species with body proportions similar to ours, created these implements. It also looks like the toolmakers preferred thick limb bones, which are the strongest parts of animal skeleton. To make that choice, you need to understand anatomy and material strength. Engineers today still use that same logic when choosing materials for machines. When we put all these discoveries together, we see that our ancestors designed systems, invented technologies, stored information, and played complex games long before modern civilization appeared. So we didn't just suddenly become intelligent. We've been building knowledge for tens of thousands of years. Scientists just drilled through about 1,700 feet of Antarctic ice and pulled up a record-breaking core. It's a 750-foot tube that reaches back about 23 million years. The core showed that this part of West Antarctica had been an open ocean back then. That means the ice sheet had collapsed before. And if it sinks again, global sea levels could rise enough to turn coastal cities into aquariums and rewrite the map of the world. To learn more, an international research team set up camp at a spot called Eerie Ice Rise. It's like a giant frozen raft stuck to Antarctica, caught on rocky bumps on the seafloor. Those bumps act like a brake, helping hold back the inland ice. But warmer ocean water is starting to melt the raft from below. If the ice thins and lifts off those rocks, the brakes are gone, and the inland ice is going straight into the ocean. That is why scientists decided to drill here. Drilling a straight hole through a third of a mile of ice sounds impossible. It can't be done with a regular drill. Instead, the crew had to use a custom hot water drill. It's basically a superheated pressure washer. It shoots near boiling water straight down to melt a vertical tunnel about 1 foot wide. The problem is, the ice tries to heal the hole shut. The continent itself is saying, nope. If the hot water stops flowing for even a little bit, the tunnel starts freezing again and the hole begins to close. And since they were in the middle of a frozen wasteland, they had to set up a small camp of tents with its own power supply. The nearest station is about 450 miles away, so any serious breakdown could mess with the whole project. For comparison, the space station is about 250 miles above Earth's surface. So this expedition had to be planned almost like a space mission. Granted, the ISS is still harder to reach, but you get the point. If the camp lost power, the researchers would have to fix it fast, within 1 or 2 days, or the hole could freeze shut completely. You might already know that ice can trap ancient microbes and particles from the air. Snow falls, freezes, and stacks up in layers. Each layer traps whatever was floating around at the time. Stuff like dust or gases, even tiny organisms. That's how scientists read the past. Those stacked layers are called ice cores. But the researchers weren't after the ice. What scientists recovered there is a sediment core. Instead of frozen snow, it's a long tube of mud and rock drilled from the ocean floor under the ice. Think of it like this. Ice cores record what was in the air. Sediment cores record what was happening in the ocean. Everything floating in the water eventually sinks. When a massive ceiling of thick ice completely covers the ocean, the water below goes pitch black. Without sunlight, there's no way for plants to grow. The only stuff sinking to the seafloor is heavily crushed rock, physically scraped off the land by the moving ice above. When the climate warms, the ice pulls back and sunlight brings back life. The seafloor starts building the open water layer again. Over time, you get a repeating pattern. Gritty rock when it's iced over, pale shell-packed mud when it isn't. It's like Earth creating a barcode for scientists to find. When the drilling crew finally cracked open their giant tube of dirt, the mud was filled with marine fossils, the physical remains of ancient ocean bugs. And those specific bugs absolutely require sunlight to survive. Their entire food chain runs on big algae blooms at the ocean surface, so finding them is big proof that under warmer conditions, the ice pulled back completely. The total disappearance is the scary part about how West Antarctica behaves. The ice doesn't simply melt away inch by inch in a slow, predictable way. It has a built-in tipping point. Finding those deep-sea fossils suggests that once the ocean gets warm enough to lift the ice and release that rocky parking brake, the whole frozen raft can suffer a full system failure. It might basically vacate the premises, and that kind of collapse is what makes scientists nervous. Researchers call this one-way behavior hysteresis. This is Billy. He's sitting on a sled at the top of a snowy hill. The sled is pointed downhill, but Billy isn't moving yet because the snow is still holding him in place. Then someone gives the sled a tiny push. At first, it's just a slow creep. But once the runners start sliding, gravity takes over and the sled picks up speed on its own. The key part is that even if the person who pushed Billy instantly regrets it, the sled won't stop. Huge ice sheets can work the same way. Push the planet past a certain temperature line and the retreat can keep going on its own. Even if temperatures drop again centuries later, the melting doesn't automatically slam on the brakes. So scientists are trying to figure out how much warmer it has to get for West Antarctica to enter that locked-in mode. One estimate says the danger zone starts at about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above the global average temperature in the mid-1800s. They still can't say that's the exact flip point or give a clean countdown. That's what this core is meant to help confirm. But the ice isn't only getting hit from the outside by warmer water. Parts of Antarctica get heat from below too. Near the Ross Ice Shelf sits Ross Island, and on it, an active volcano. It's called Mount Erebus. It rises about 12,400 feet above sea level, and it's the southernmost active volcano on Earth. But the cool part is that inside its summit crater is a persistent lava lake, an actual glowing pool of molten rock that's been churning for decades. That's not normal. Only a handful of volcanoes on Earth maintain long-lived lava lakes. Erebus does it while surrounded by one of the coldest environments on the planet. Antarctica can be brutally cold at the surface, but Mount Erebus is powered by heat from deep inside the Earth. That heat doesn't care if the air above is negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Magma rises because it's hot and buoyant. As long as fresh magma keeps feeding the crater and gas keeps escaping, the lava lake can stay molten. Erebus also creates something you rarely see elsewhere: ice towers built by a volcano. Hot gases escape through cracks, hitting the freezing air and instantly solidify into tall, hollow chimneys of ice. Some of the caves inside those towers can be surprisingly warm compared to the outside air, creating strange little pockets where microbial life can survive in the dark. Another cool thing about this region is the miles of subglacial lakes. Some are the size of small cities. Pressure helps keep them liquid and heat from below keeps them from freezing. A bunch of them connect through hidden channels, so they fill and drain like an underground plumbing system. Satellites can even catch the ice above rising and falling as the water moves. Erebus matters because it proves West Antarctica can get heat from below. That heat can melt the ice at the base and create water underneath. Those buried lakes matter because that water acts like lubrication. Less friction means the ice can slide faster. And when lakes fill and drain, that slippery layer can shift around suddenly. When grip and support both weaken at the same time, that sled doesn't need much of a push. there's no doomsday clock on the wall counting down to some dramatic end of the world. Even if West Antarctica starts sliding into the ocean, it wouldn't happen overnight. Coastlines would shift inch by inch, one storm at a time, with decades in between. Cities wouldn't vanish with a single wave. We'd have to do a lot of redesigning and moving. And centuries from now, if parts of today's coastline sit underwater, future divers might swim past the tops of skyscrapers the way we dive through ancient shipwrecks.
A perfectly carved vertical hole hidden deep in the North Caucasus Mountains drops into the Earth like someone drilled straight toward the planet's core. Some people even compare the shaft to internal passages inside the Egyptian pyramids. Could there really be a connection between them? So the public learned about this mystery cave thanks to a local cave enthusiast who was hiking in the North Caucasus in 2011. The rugged slopes of the Kara Hora mountain, with glacier-carved valleys and cliffs that have stood there against all sorts of weather for thousands of years, seem to be a perfect place if you want to hide something. And that's where Shemakov found something that looked like an entrance to an underground cave. He invited a team of cavers, and together they went down the shaft. At first, they were sure it was a geological formation, but the deeper they descended, the more it looked like something carefully built by humans. There were massive stone blocks that seemed fitted together so tightly that you couldn't push a knife blade between them. Some sources also say the shaft drops almost perfectly vertical, and its walls look polished, as if giant machinery smoothed them long before modern tools existed. But in reality, this smooth appearance results from natural geological fractures. What's really weird are openings resembling ventilation channels. These passages seem designed to move air through the structure. Natural caves rarely organize airflow this cleanly. That detail alone makes researchers argue whether someone designed and built all this intentionally. And if someone did build it on purpose, it would have to be one really advanced civilization. Some people said Shemakov described his discovery in every detail in his diary. But even if it really existed, it was lost. So we'll never know what was in it. In fact, we know so little about this man, and his discovery wasn't mentioned a lot on TV or elsewhere, that some people even questioned if he existed at all. Or maybe he saw something down there he shouldn't have seen. And there's no way to double-check, as he was hit by a car and passed away just 4 years after the discovery. This tragedy fueled even more rumors, speculation, and conspiracy theories. Geologists are trying to find a more logical explanation for this shaft, of course. The Caucasus Mountains are part of a massive chain called the Alpida Belt, which stretches all the way from southeastern Europe right into Asia. The Caucasus formed as a result of a tectonic plate collision. All these massive plates are still restless and constantly pushing against each other today. So the entire region gets hit with strong earthquakes on a regular basis. Plus, water, pressure, and chemical reactions can carve vertical shafts over millions of years. Underground rivers dissolve softer rock, and harder layers remain smooth, eventually forming deep chimneys. But erosion usually creates randomness, and Kara Hora has symmetry, angles, and fitted stone features that resemble architecture more than accident. Now, getting inside the shaft is still extremely dangerous. You'd have to face sheer drops, unstable ledges, and oxygen levels that thin out deeper underground. Twisting tunnels make it super tricky to find your way, and locals warn that some of the first explorers who entered never returned. Luckily, modern teams can use ground-penetrating radar and remote sensors instead of human descent to study the shaft. With every new scan, researchers find more voids that are still unreachable. Meanwhile, Kara Hora has interesting neighbors. For example, Verovkina Cave, currently the second deepest known cave on the planet. This monster drops nearly 1.5 miles straight down, deeper than 4 Empire State Buildings stacked end-to-end. Explorers descend through freezing waterfalls, razor-sharp rock corridors, and vertical pits that swallow light completely. Temperatures here hover just above freezing, and underground rivers roar through darkness nobody saw until recently. If you dare reach the bottom, prepare for a journey that will last weeks of staged camps, ropes stretching thousands of feet, and absolute trust in teammates. One mistake down there means you'll be gone for good. Veryovkina constantly floods and reshapes itself year after year, so cavers have to deal with flood pulses all the time. Water cuts deeper into the limestone rock and expands chambers slowly but surely, and then, because of the volume, suddenly bursts through cave openings. But this doesn't stop scientists from going down there to measure oxygen, airflow, and mineral growth to understand how caves evolve over geologic time. And that's how explorers discover strange microbial life that somehow survives without sunlight and feeds on minerals instead of plants. These ecosystems resemble conditions scientists expect beneath icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. This means the cave could be a great training ground for future space exploration. But before we head to space, let's check out another super interesting cave system, this time in northern Spain. There's a chamber there which scientists call Pit of Bones. Explorers have to trek into a pitch-black underground maze to squeeze through a narrow shaft that suddenly drops straight down for 42 feet. At the bottom of that geological trap, you slide down a steep stone ramp into a cramped, muddy chamber that holds the largest and oldest collection of early human fossils ever discovered. It's a biological time capsule with the remains of at least 28 ancient humans, frozen long before modern history even began. Explorers also found over 6,500 fossil fragments mixed with the remains of at least 166 Ice Age cave bears, lions, wolves, and foxes that probably fell down the shaft by accident. But the human bones are a massive mystery because they seem to have ended up down there much earlier than the animals. Who these people actually were is still a huge debate. When researchers looked closer at their skulls and jaws, they noticed strong, super early Neanderthal traits. Then things got even crazier when scientists miraculously extracted mitochondrial DNA from those ancient bones. It linked these individuals not only to early Neanderthals, but also to the Denisovans, a mysterious group of ancient humans found thousands of miles away in Siberia. It proves our ancestors were moving and mixing in ways far more complicated than anyone ever guessed. The drama doesn't stop at genetics, though. This dark cave might actually hold the world's first assassination mystery and its earliest funeral. Out of thousands of bones, archaeologists found absolutely no everyday tools or food waste, except for a single, carefully crafted quartzite hand axe they nicknamed Excalibur. Because of this, some researchers think the group intentionally lowered their deceased down the shaft with the axe as a ritual. It was probably a way to show compassion hundreds of thousands of years before we thought possible. At the same time, one of the skulls shows two identical lethal fractures that look exactly like intentional blows. To get the exact timeline for all this prehistoric drama, scientists use cutting-edge tech like electron spin resonance and uranium series dating, and finally locked down that it's 430,000 years old. Now, let's jump across the world to another geological giant, Devil's Tower in Wyoming. The formation shoots nearly 900 feet above the surrounding land. Its surface has long vertical columns, and it looks like some careful hands carved them. But geologists explain the structure formed when molten rock pushed upwards underground and cooled slowly. As the rock cooled, it turned into hexagonal columns, similar to how drying mud splits into patterns, just scaled up to impossible size. Erosion later removed the softer surrounding rock and left the hardened core unprotected. Local tribes thought the tower was sacred and made up stories about giant bears clawing the stone during mythical hunts. Now, scientists agree on much of its volcanic origin, but debates continue about whether magma ever reached the surface or hardened entirely underground. Even after more than a century of study, Devil's Tower still has its mysteries. When you connect all these places, engineered shafts, endless caves, and underground ecosystem, one thing becomes clear. Earth hides entire worlds beneath our feet, and we've barely scratched the surface.
Something strange is happening in Egypt's desert. Giant, mysterious green circles are popping up everywhere, hundreds of them. And then you've got dozens of canals and roads connecting into something that looks like a river. But it's not exactly that. This is the ambitious New Delta project, and it has one controversial goal: to flood the desert. It's easy to see why. More than 90% of Egypt is desert, miles and miles of sand dunes and dry land under scorching heat. Almost nothing can grow there. So today there are basically only two areas where Egypt can grow large amounts of food: the Nile Valley and the Nile Delta. Together, they cover only about 5% of the country's land, but their crops feed about 99% of Egyptians, and that's becoming a real problem because Egypt's population keeps growing. By 2050, estimates say their population will grow by about 40 million people, reaching nearly 160 million. The Nile Valley and the Nile Delta just won't be enough to handle that kind of demand. See the problem here, right? The population is growing, people need more food, but most of the country is desert and there's not much room for new farms. So what can they do? The easy solution is the same one you use when your fridge is empty. You order in. Egypt does that too. They buy huge amounts of food from other countries. But importing food is expensive and time-consuming, so they need to create more space for farms. And they need it fast. That's where the New Delta project comes in. This is a massive agricultural plan meant to turn parts of the desert into green fields. The idea is to move water and farming west of the Nile, and if it works, it could expand Egypt's farmland by about 15%. Sounds great on paper, right? But in reality, this plan comes with a lot of controversy. Their idea is to create an artificial river right in the middle of the desert, about 70 miles long. To make it work, they're building tons of roads and canals to support it. And those strange green circles I mentioned earlier are irrigation systems. They pull water up from wells or pipelines, then slowly spin around and spray water in a big circle over the crops. Okay, so we've got this huge artificial river being built in the middle of the desert, but where is all that water coming from? Well, it comes from three main sources. The first, and by far the biggest, is treated wastewater. They take used water, the kind that goes down sinks and toilets in our homes, for example, and clean it up so it can be used safely again. To do that, they had to build a modern treatment plant in El Hammam, a town in Egypt's northern coast west of Alexandria. Its construction was completed in 2023, and it's absolutely massive. It's so big that it now holds the world record as the largest wastewater treatment plant in the world. It cleans an enormous amount of water every day, enough to fill about 3,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and most of that water goes straight to farming. The second source of water comes from the Nile. Basically, they're taking water from Egypt's most famous river, sending it through massive canals and pushing it deep into the desert, into this new, man-made river. Finally, the third source is deep fossil groundwater. In other words, it's water from way under the desert. Down there is something called the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer, basically a huge underground reserve of water that's been trapped for thousands of years. And this is where the controversy starts. It's true that there's a lot of water under the Western Desert, but it's limited. Because this is fossil water, I mean it's so old that it doesn't really get replaced. Once you pump it out, it won't refill anytime soon, not in our lifetime, and probably not even for many generations. On top of that, the deeper you drill, the saltier the water can get, and we don't want that. You see, most crops don't like salt. If the water is too salty, plants grow slower, give smaller harvests, or dry out. And when you keep watering with salty water, salt builds up in the soil. The water evaporates, but the salt stays. Over time, the land can turn hard, dry, and basically useless for farming. So pumping groundwater might help in the short term, but it raises a big question. Is this really doable in the long run? And there are other concerns too. The project was sold as a big win. Grow more food, create more jobs, and help Egyptians. It also boosts the economy because they're growing expensive fruits and vegetables that get sold abroad to places like Canada, Australia, and Japan. But that's also the problem. Many people complain that the project is mostly about growing crops to sell abroad. And sure, exports bring money into the country, in the big picture. But that doesn't necessarily mean food gets cheaper at home, or that poorer families can afford more. Because even though it has boosted exports, it hasn't done much to prevent massive food price inflation inside the country. So, Egypt's food security problem still isn't fully solved. Many Egyptians are still dealing with high prices and tight budgets. Another controversial thing is that no one knows how much this project actually costs. The press sometimes mentions $5.2 billion, but some experts put the total closer to $9.7 billion. Just the wastewater treatment part alone is said to cost more than $500 million, but it's very hard to know for sure. Journalists and researchers say there isn't much transparency, and the project's finances are tough to track. Experts also warn that farming in the desert is crazy expensive. Unlike the rich soil in the Nile Valley, the western desert is mostly dry sand with very few nutrients. So if you want to grow anything out there, you need tons of irrigation just to make the land workable. And powering all those irrigation systems takes a ton of energy, making farming in the desert even more expensive. Even if you already have a giant artificial river to help you out. Still, some people argue the risks and the costs are worth it, and that things are starting to change. Take wheat, for example. For years, Egypt has been the #1 wheat importer in the world, and that's not exactly a title you want to win, because it costs the country billions of dollars every year. So then the new Delta project comes along, and wheat becomes one of their main targets. Egyptian authorities say it helped them cut wheat imports by 17% in 2025. That saved them around $250 million. This was such a big achievement that the world now has a new #1 wheat importer, China. And it's not just wheat. Oranges, potatoes, grapes. Agriculture is booming over there. According to estimates, food exports jumped from 5 million tons in 2020 to over 8 million tons in 2024. That's why we can say the new Delta project is already changing Egypt's agriculture. And from satellite images, you can see it's changing what the country looks like too, turning dry desert into bright green patches. It's real, and the transformation is pretty dramatic. So there's no doubt this project is both an impressive engineering achievement and a huge experiment. But researchers say it's still too early to know if it will actually solve Egypt's food problem. In the end, it all depends on water, energy costs, and who gets to make the big decisions. If the Nile, treated wastewater, and fossil groundwater can be managed in a sustainable way, the project could seriously boost farming. And if not, it could drain precious water, make the gap between rich and poor even bigger, and leave behind an expensive footprint on the desert. Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel, carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long, and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Eupalinos tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the Valley Temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the valley temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the Valley Temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing Senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Thutmose II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it. And we're only just beginning to catch up. Warning: if you're a devoted fan of ETs and accept every story about contact with them as fact, you might want to skip this video. What you're about to hear is the hard truth, and yes, it may be disappointing. On the other hand, if the idea of them makes you uneasy, this video might actually put you at ease. And if you don't believe in those little green cuties but constantly find yourself debating people who do, just show them this. First, you need to know that there's no solid evidence that intelligent extraterrestrial life exists. What does exist is strong evidence that all the so-called ET incidents you've heard about during your whole life actually have very reasonable explanations. One of the most famous examples is the Roswell incident. On July 8, 1947, a strange object crashed on a ranch in the state of New Mexico. It was described as a flying disc. First, a local newspaper reported the story. Then the incident spread across the entire country. People claimed it was the crash of an ET spacecraft. Authorities said the object was a meteorological balloon. People didn't believe them. Rumors exploded. Many theories spread everywhere. Years later, after all the hype slowed down, the truth finally came out. The flying disc was part of a top-secret government project, a high-altitude balloon designed to detect signs of nuclear testing. But even after the truth was revealed, many people refused to accept it. The Roswell incident became a full-blown cultural phenomenon, especially among UFO enthusiasts. Yet, among the thousands of books, articles, and documentaries about Roswell, you won't find a single verified fact proving an ET spacecraft was ever involved there. That same year, another mysterious object was discovered and also caught public attention. No one knows exactly where it landed, but many people connect it to the Roswell incident. At first glance, this metallic fragment seemed extraordinary. Its internal structure looked unlike anything known at the time, which led some to believe it was part of an alien craft. Further analysis showed the object was made from an alloy of magnesium and zinc, with traces of bismuth, lead, and other elements. Of course, the presence of these elements alone doesn't prove the object was made on Earth, since these substances exist throughout the universe. Then, scientists examined the isotopic composition of magnesium and the rest of the materials. and they determined that the alloy was manufactured on Earth. Still, one thing about the sample raised eyebrows: bismuth. Some people speculated that aliens might use bismuth in some kind of propulsion or flight system. However, these ideas were purely speculative. The bismuth found in the samples contained impurities, which clearly showed it was produced using ordinary Earth-based manufacturing methods, not any unknown technology. But that technology would require a pure bismuth alloy. Unfortunately for UFO fans, the analysis showed that the bismuth in the sample contained lead impurities, which is clear evidence that no alien technology was involved. It was created on Earth by people. However, its manufacturing process was unusual because of the specific mix of elements. The object also had damage caused by impact and heat exposure. Most likely, it was a component of another top-secret surveillance balloon. Okay, how about another alien-like incident? This is the famous but though less well-known WOW signal. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio detected a strange signal from deep space. It lasted 72 seconds and stood out dramatically from the background cosmic noise. Astronomer Jerry Amon, who discovered it, was so shocked that he wrote "Wow" on the printout. The scientific community briefly suspected that this radio signal might be a message from alien technology, but it was never detected again. Later explanations suggested it may have been radio emissions from a neutron star, amplified by a cold hydrogen cloud. You can also find realistic explanations for other similar cases on the internet. However, Roswell and similar cases happened decades ago. But what about modern stories? You've probably seen videos recorded by pilots showing fast-moving, elusive objects in the sky. Scientists carefully analyzed these videos and found something interesting. The observed behavior contradicted the laws of physics. If an object moved that fast through air or water, friction should produce a visible heat trail or plasma glow. But nothing like that appears in the footage. Does that mean it's alien technology? Probably not. A much simpler explanation is that the cameras used weren't advanced enough to capture what was actually happening. We don't know the distance between the object and the camera. We don't know its real speed. It could be a visual artifact, a sensor glitch, or a lens distortion. If you still believe these recordings show real UFOs, ask yourself this: why, after all these years, do we still have no high-quality footage? Why is it always low resolution, blurry, and often black and white? Millions of unclear images mean nothing compared to a single clear, high-resolution video, and we don't have one. The probability that UFO sightings are optical illusions or sensor errors is far higher than the probability that they represent alien spacecraft. Many people simply want to believe in ETs, so they amplify hype about any news hinting at extraterrestrial technology. A perfect example is Oumuamua, the first known object to enter our solar system from interstellar space. Some people panicked, claiming it was an alien probe. In reality, it was almost certainly an interstellar asteroid-like object. Remember the more recent panic surrounding 3I Atlas? Online rumors claimed it was an artificial object that would approach Earth in November 2025 and change our lives forever. November has passed, the object is now moving farther away. No alien invasion happened. So does that mean the only way to find extraterrestrial life is to wait for random space rocks to pass by? Or hope someone records a UFO in 4K, or 1080 at least? Can we actually do something ourselves? Yes, we can search for technosignatures. Technosignatures are signs of technological activity that intelligent life could do. These are biosignatures like microbes or molecules that suggest simple life. But searching for biosignatures across space is incredibly difficult. Technosignatures are easier. They include radio signals, laser emissions, or atmospheric pollutants such as carbon dioxide or methane. Earth itself emits technosignatures detectable from afar, so why not look for the same on other planets? Where do we start? There are over 6,000 known exoplanets. any alien technology would be based on the same physics and chemistry as ours, because the laws of physics are universal. Maybe massive solar panels on a distant planet produce excess heat we can detect. Or perhaps large-scale industry releases chemicals visible through powerful telescopes. There's a checklist of techno-signatures scientists look for. When something matches the list, the real work begins. Researchers must confirm that the signal comes from technology, not a natural process in space. A few years ago, astronomers observed a Tabby's star, about 1,280 light-years away. Then, they noticed that it began to darken as some huge object blocked it. Its unusual dimming led to speculation about alien megastructures. They suggested it could be some giant alien ship that parked near the star. In reality, it was just space dust flying around. That's why every technosignature requires careful verification. However, so far, no confirmed technosignatures have been found. Space is vast. The planets are distant. Maybe we simply can't see each other yet. Even if there is intelligent life, our communication might be impossible with current technology for them and for us. One famous Italian-American physicist, Enrico Fermi, once summed this up with a simple question. Where is everybody? No. How is it possible that no one in the whole cosmos has contacted us yet? Perhaps the most uncomfortable answer is the simplest one. Maybe we really are alone. Of course, there's a possibility that the aliens just don't want to get in touch with us, or they're still developing their technologies for interstellar connection. But let's be realistic. Aliens don't exist. Probably. The Tower of London is the ultimate symbol of royal power. For nearly 1,000 years, it housed kings, queens, and the crown jewels. It served as a fortress, palace, and prison. It is one of the most studied and documented historic sites in the world. Yet, archaeologists uncovered unsettling human remains only 10 feet right under the walkway. Who were these people, and how did they stay hidden for so long? The Tower of London sits on the River Thames, in the heart of London. It's a true medieval castle with thick, well-preserved stone walls, armored gates, and watchtowers like you only see in movies. It was built almost a millennium ago, when William the Conqueror took control of England. He needed a fortress to lock the city down and send the message, the new king is here, so better behave. The entire castle complex covers 18 acres, which is about the exact size of the White House grounds. It still keeps and displays the crown jewels under guard. The Citadel was also a high-security prison for centuries, holding high-profile prisoners locked away. But it wasn't just a prison for humans. For centuries, the tower was a royal zoo filled with lions, elephants, and leopards. The King of Norway even sent a polar bear, which was allowed to swim in the Thames on a long leash to catch fish. One of the biggest attractions is the White Tower, a massive stone keep. Rising about 90 feet, it had been the tallest building in all of London for hundreds of years. Kings famously whitewashed the stones to make them gleam. It stood out like a blinding beacon above the dark, muddy city. Another must-see spot is the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, the tower's historic church. It served as the final resting place for famous prisoners and nobles alike. It was just outside of this very chapel that archaeologists made a chilling discovery. The mystery started in 2019 when a routine check uncovered 2 burials. When archaeologists returned to dig some more in 2025, the situation grew from unexpected to, hey, what is going on here? Over 20 skeletons were packed into the soil, mixed with fragments from older burials, proving this spot had been used and reused many times before. These graves span centuries, from the 1200s to the 1600s. So we're not looking at one tragedy. It seems to be a place that kept getting used again and again throughout medieval London. One situation feels like it's from a horror movie. A cluster of at least 6 people from the 1300s that looks unusually messy compared to the others. The timing lines up with the era of the Black Death in London, so this group could be plague-related. But researchers are careful with conclusions for now. On the other hand, some graves look the opposite of rushed. They look expensive. Several people were buried in coffins. In one case, the wood had rotted away completely, leaving behind a perfect shadow of a coffin stamped into the clay. The report says this coffin shadow likely held a juvenile buried in the 1200s. Then there's the chapel itself that might give us some clues. The current building is basically the newest version on this same spot. It's possible that there were 3 or 4 earlier chapels here, and the dig even exposed lost walls and an old floor surface deep down. But what else can we learn about these people? Here's where science can help. Researchers look at teeth. Your adult teeth form when you're a kid, and they lock in chemical traces from the water you drink and the food you ate. It basically creates a permanent record of where you grew up. So the team analyzed 2 specific skeletons. The first one seemed wealthier. The chemistry suggests they might have grown up in Wales and moved around a few times. They even had traces of a high-sugar diet. That was a huge luxury back then. The second person had a totally different story. Their bones showed signs of chronic stress and a much harder childhood. So these were 2 people from opposite ends of the social ladder. One rich and the other not so much. But they both ended up near each other to be discovered centuries later. Millions of people visit the Tower of London every year. They take selfies and walk the grounds, totally unaware that they might be standing on top of massive tombs. And that forces you to ask the obvious question. If a place this famous can hide ancient graveyards, what else is out there? Because the tower is definitely not the only landmark keeping secrets. In 2019, the fire at Notre Dame forced a massive rebuild. That construction forced workers to lift parts of the floor and reveal a spooky secret. Several tombs hiding 2 human-shaped lead sarcophagi, sealed like metal time capsules. And inside, there were details that shouldn't survive: fabric, hair, and even leaves that were left on the head. This stuff points to an important person. It sounds unbelievable, but they managed to identify the person as Antoine de la Porte, a church official who passed away in 1710. The second coffin became its own mini detective story. Scientists nicknamed the man inside the Horseman because his bones showed signs of riding for years. Some new analysis suggests that he could have been Joachim du Bellay, a well-known poet from the 1500s. So, we have secret graves in London and Paris. That part almost makes sense. These are old, crowded cities where people have lived for centuries. But there's one place on Earth where history wasn't supposed to happen at all. Antarctica. Yes, almost literally the edge of the world with nothing human anywhere nearby for hundreds of miles. And still, in 1985, a Chilean scientist found human remains on an ice-free beach in Livingston Island on a spot now called Yamana Beach. A human skull in Antarctica sounds impossible, but the dates make it worse. When the remains were studied, the person appeared to be a young woman around 21, likely from the southern Chilean channels. She passed away in the early sealing area, roughly 1819 to 1825. That's basically the opening minutes of humans showing up in that region. So why would a young woman end up there? One idea is that she might have come with early sealers, maybe as a guide or part of the crew. The original researcher even suggested she could have been abandoned there for unknown reasons. Plus, the spot where they found her is known to have been visited by early 19th century sealers. The pieces fit together somewhat, but no one can really pin down the story. And it gets even stranger. The first discovery in 1985 was her skull, but later researchers came back to the same area and found more human bones. In 1988 and again in 1993, they recovered 2 femurs, basically thigh bones, near the original site. The big question is obvious. Were those bones from the same person, or did more than one person pass away here? The plan was to use DNA testing to check if the femurs matched the skull. If these 3 sites prove anything, it's that new discoveries could be anywhere. But the really exciting part is daydreaming about where we could go next. We are entering a phase where technology could make history feel like time travel. Think about what we can do with the gathered data. We can already pull DNA from a tooth to find out what someone ate or where they grew up. Maybe one day we could take that biological code and use AI to completely recreate a person. Imagine a digital human that looks just like them, with the right eye color, skin texture, and even scars. Then we combine that with the environment. Laser scanning allows us to map every inch of those buried foundations. If you feed that into a physics engine, you can rebuild the walls that fell down 500 years ago. That means in our lifetime, you might not just visit the Tower of London to see it as it is right now. You could strap on a headset and step inside the chapel as it looked in 1348, being face to face with history, just without the bad smells or the risk of catching the plague. There's something absolutely massive and deeply unsettling hiding right next to Stonehenge. More than a dozen giant pits carved into the ground. They're all spaced with eerie precision and form a perfect circle, more than a mile wide. For years, nobody could explain them. They were too big to be animal traps, too organized to be natural sinkholes, and way too deliberate to be random. And the biggest question was, who had the power, knowledge, and reason to reshape the land on this scale 4,000 years ago? So these pits surround a place called Durrington Walls, a huge Neolithic settlement just a short walk from Stonehenge. Archaeologists now say humans dug them around 2500 BCE, during the late Neolithic period, when people supposedly lived simple farming lives without metal tools, written language, or modern math. Each pit stretches about 30 feet across and plunges roughly 15 feet down, and together they form an almost flawless ring. To prove the pits weren't natural, scientists went full detective mode. They drilled soil cores and tested the dirt itself, including microscopic traces of ancient DNA and something called luminescence dating, which tells you when the soil last saw sunlight. Every test pointed to the same answer. Humans made these pits on purpose. Here's where it gets wild. The pits weren't dug randomly as people moved along. They were laid out as a single unified project. That means Neolithic builders had to visualize a massive circle, measure distances across open land, and coordinate teams over a huge area without any GPS, drones, or even aerial maps. All they had were people, ropes, wooden tools, and shared knowledge. So why would they invest so much effort and do this? Archaeologists think the pits formed part of a ritual landscape, not a practical one. Durrington Walls already looks like a place where people gathered for ceremonies, feasts, and seasonal events. The pit circle may have marked a sacred boundary. It could have separated ordinary land from a spiritually charged space. Some researchers think the pits symbolized a border between the world of the living and the underworld. The scale of the structure is pretty impressive. It may be one of the largest prehistoric monuments ever built in Britain, even bigger than Stonehenge itself when you look at the total area. And unlike Stonehenge's towering rocks, this monument stayed invisible for thousands of years, quietly hiding under the grass. Generations walked over it without knowing they were standing inside a gigantic ancient design. For a long time, we underestimated ancient people. We imagined them reacting to nature instead of shaping it. But discoveries like this keep proving that wrong. The builders of Durrington Walls didn't just live in the landscape, but engineered it. They thought in terms of geometry, symbolism, and long-term meaning. And this isn't the only case. All over the world, thanks to new technology, scientists keep finding proof that ancient humans worked on massive scales with shocking precision. In the Amazon rainforest, researchers found traces of 2,500-year-old cities hiding beneath the jungle canopy. Scientists spent more than 20 years exploring the area on foot before technology finally cracked the case. The LiDAR technology, which is like X-ray vision that surveys a landscape using lasers to digitally peel away the jungle, scanned a massive area of over 100 square miles. It helped to spot more than 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms, which are likely used as homes or public buildings. They also found agricultural terraces, drainage systems, and carefully shaped farmland. This wasn't a random settlement. It was well planned. At least 15 distinct settlements appeared, all connected by wide, straight roads that cut cleanly through the landscape. These roads didn't follow rivers or slopes as you'd expect. They crossed each other at perfect right angles, forming a grid. The researchers believe people from the Quillamope and Upanu cultures lived there between about 500 BCE and 300 to 600 CE. They farmed corn and sweet potatoes, reshaped the land, and built a system that lasted for centuries. Discoveries like this prove something huge. Far more people lived in the Amazon than scientists ever thought. Tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. And they didn't just survive there. They engineered the landscape. Just like at Durrington Walls, the real story hid in plain sight until technology caught up. Then there's Peru, with one of archaeology's biggest headaches, the Nazca lines. These gigantic designs of animals, plants, and geometric shapes stretch across the earth like an ancient message, so huge that only birds or satellites can see them properly. For decades, people have tried to figure out why the Nazca people made them, how they did it, and what those massive patterns mean. And until recently, the mystery stayed stubbornly unsolved. Walking the desert or flying over it, archaeologists would spot lines and figures and wonder if anything was missing. But the ones already known were just the tip of the iceberg. Traditional fieldwork, with people on the ground slowly mapping things out by hand, took forever. And even then, dozens of smaller designs were just too faint for the unassisted eye. So, instead of scanning the desert on foot, researchers taught artificial intelligence how to see patterns in aerial and drone imagery. They fed terabytes of pictures into trained models, and AI began flagging shapes, curves, and ancient outlines that had been hiding for centuries. In just about 6 months, it identified 303 previously unknown geoglyphs in the Nazca Desert. It almost doubled the number of figures we knew before and showed entire classes of designs. Some of these new shapes are tiny, just a few feet across, but they sit next to giant ones like the hummingbird or monkey. Thanks to all the new finds, scientists can finally start testing theories they had about the purpose of the lines. It looks like the lines weren't just decorations. Many may have been walkways or routes used for ceremonial movement. In case you're worried, AI isn't replacing archaeologists. They still check every promising lead on the ground and interpret everything the machines find. Back in Britain, the Pit Circle also connects to an even older structure, an early Neolithic site called Robin Hood's Ball. Because it stood so far from the famous stones, it felt like a side character. But it turns out Robin Hood's Ball is from around 3600 BCE, which makes it about 500 years older than Stonehenge itself. It's what archaeologists call a causewayed enclosure, which sounds fancy but really means a big circular earthwork made of ditches and banks. Instead of one clean trench, the ditches are broken into short segments with little gaps in between. And instead of keeping people out, it probably brought them together. Archaeologists think these enclosures worked as gathering places, spots for meetings, feasts, rituals, and social bonding among the first farming communities. Then came the twist no one expected. While preparing land at Lark Hill, a hillside northeast of Stonehenge, for new military housing, archaeologists found signs of another causewayed enclosure. This discovery flipped the map upside down. The landscape wasn't growing outward from Stonehenge, it was already alive long before the stones ever went up. As researchers dug deeper, they found hundreds of flint tools, beautifully made leaf-shaped arrowheads, chunks of human skull, and pieces of antler likely used as digging tools. Then came the pottery. different styles showed up in different places. Some from the enclosure ditches, others from nearby pits. That matters because pottery styles often act like cultural fingerprints. The mix suggests something big. Different groups of people were visiting the same place and brought their own traditions, tools, and objects with them. All of this changes how we see Stonehenge. The stones didn't appear out of nowhere. They rose in a landscape already loaded with meaning, memory, and movement. Every new discovery like the ones near Stonehenge in the Amazon jungle and Peru forces archaeologists to rewrite textbooks and the whole world to rethink the idea of progress. It turns out that ancient people made up for the absence of steel and electricity with observation, creativity, and shared meaning. Earth isn't a perfect ball, we know that. But the real mystery is miles beneath our feet. Way down below the crust, the planet has been cooling down for billions of years, just not evenly. The Pacific side loses heat faster, while the African side slows that loss by trapping it longer. That difference is why Earth stays restless, with earthquakes tearing the ground apart and volcanic fire breaking through the surface. Think of Earth like a massive engine that's been shut off. The outside cools first, but deep inside, heat lingers. That internal heat is leftover energy from when the planet formed, and it's been slowly trying to escape ever since. For a long time, scientists assumed Earth lost heat evenly in all directions. Hot in the middle, slowly cooling everywhere else. But when a team at the University of Oslo ran simulations that rewound the planet 400 million years and tracked where the heat actually escaped, they saw something very different. The cooling wasn't symmetrical at all. One side of the planet is doing it faster than the other. The difference is striking. The Pacific Hemisphere, the side dominated by the world's largest and deepest ocean, has cooled by about 50 degrees Kelvin, which is roughly 90 degrees Fahrenheit difference, compared to the Africa-Eurasia side. The reason is basically insulation. Africa and Eurasia are on a layered ancient continental crust. The Pacific side is the opposite. It's mostly ocean, resting on a much thinner crust where warmth escapes easily. Plus, the cold seawater on top pulls that heat out non-stop. Because the Pacific side is cooling so fast, the rock deep underground is getting heavy and sinking back toward the core. It's like a giant slow-motion conveyor belt that drags the Earth's crust down with it. Heavy materials sink. As it sinks, it pulls on the edges of tectonic plates, creating stress, trenches, earthquakes, and chains of volcanoes. Most of Earth's earthquakes and volcanoes happen in a giant loop called the Ring of Fire. This is where the ocean floor gets cold, heavy, and sinks deep into the planet. All that sinking rock travels thousands of miles down until it slams into a massive continent-sized structure sitting right near Earth's core. Scientists call this a blob because the heavy ocean floor is constantly falling on top of it. The Pacific blob is squashed flat and pinned down, sitting heavy and locked in place. But the other half of the world is doing the exact opposite. Under Africa, there aren't many sinking plates to act as a weight. Without that pressure holding it down, the African blob is free to grow tall and light. It pushes upward, lifting the ground from below and reshaping the entire continent. In fact, that rising bubble is already starting to tear the surface apart. In East Africa, a massive crack known as the Great Rift Valley is slowly opening up as the ground is pushed from below. Eventually, the pressure will become so high that Africa will literally split in two, allowing a brand new ocean to rush into the gap. There's a cool theory that suggests these blobs might actually be the remains of an ancient planet named Theia. Some researchers believe that Theia crashed into Earth billions of years ago. And while part of it broke off to form the moon, some heavy chunks might have sunk deep inside our planet. So, the reason our interior is so lopsided might be because we literally have pieces of a different world buried inside our own. But that's just a wild theory. Whatever their origin, the blobs matter because they help split the planet into two different behaviors. On the Pacific side, cold slabs keep sinking down and piling up. On the opposite side, heat builds up deep and pushes upward over time. One half is dominated by downward motion, the other by upward motion. And this imbalance doesn't stop at the mantle. It shows up at the very center of the planet because Earth's inner core is still growing. Liquid iron around it gradually turns solid and attaches to the core. This process doesn't progress at the same rate everywhere. One side of the inner core builds up faster than the other. This might sound like it should throw the planet off balance, but it doesn't. Earth's interior isn't rigid like a solid metal ball. Over time, stuff inside can gradually move around. Gravity pulls everything toward the center, helping everything get a bit smoother and keeping the core pretty round. But pretty round doesn't mean perfect. If you want a real example of how uneven Earth is on the inside, look at the Indian Ocean. Where there's more mass underground, gravity pulls a little harder. Where there's less mass, it pulls less. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, there's a huge anomaly called the Indian Ocean Gravity Hole. In that spot, Earth's pull is weaker than normal, so weak that it can't hold the ocean's surface up at the usual level. The water actually dips downward. You wouldn't notice it sailing through, but you'd technically be sitting about 300 feet lower than the rest of the world's oceans. It's an invisible valley in the sea caused entirely by missing mass deep inside the planet. However, Earth isn't the only world hiding a messy interior behind a smooth surface. Even the Moon is like this. Over billions of years, Earth's gravity slowed the Moon's rotation until it locked into place, keeping one face permanently pointed toward Earth. That's what we know as the near side and the far side. This mattered early in the Moon's history. The near side always faced Earth, while the far side always faced deep space. That long-term setup affected how heat was stored and released inside the Moon. When NASA mapped the Moon's gravity using two spacecraft called GRAIL, they measured something called the love number. It's a value that tells scientists how much a planet or moon flexes under gravity. The Moon's love number turned out higher than expected, which meant its interior was softer than it should be. When scientists looked closer at the gravity data, they found that most of this flexibility came from the side facing Earth. The Moon's near side is softer and warmer deep down, while the far side is cooler and more rigid. Measurements suggest the near side mantle is significantly hotter and more volcanic. That difference shows on the outside. Because the near side was so hot and soft, ancient lava could easily punch through the crust and flood the surface. That created those big dark patches we see at night. On the other hand, the far side stayed colder and stiffer, so the lava never flowed the same way. Back on Earth, the Pacific has another quirk worth mentioning. Our planet isn't just spinning in place. It orbits the Sun at over 66,000 miles per hour, and the entire solar system is moving through the galaxy like a car driving through a swarm of bugs. Over long periods of time, objects drifting in from deep space are more likely to hit the side of Earth that's moving forward. And because the Pacific Ocean covers such a huge stretch of that side of the planet, it naturally ends up catching more impacts than smaller oceans or continents. This creates a strange coincidence. The same hemisphere that is leaking the most heat from within is also the world's biggest graveyard for things arriving from the outside. Because it is so vast and lonely, space agencies even use its most remote coordinates as a spacecraft cemetery at a spot called Point Nemo. We deliberately aim satellites and massive space stations like Mir to crash right there. So the Pacific ends up taking the hits from two directions, by accident from the universe and on purpose from us. Earth is restless, continents drift, oceans open and close. In a few 100 million years, the map will look completely different. The Pacific is actually shrinking right now. Eventually, the Americas might crash into Asia, and a new ocean will have to take over the job of being the planet's main radiator and its front bumper. But for now, we should probably be thankful for that massive, chilly, unlucky ocean. Tiny microbes, basically ancient germs, have been frozen in Arctic ice for tens of thousands of years, just chilling there, since woolly mammoths were still walking around. And now, scientists think these little guys might wake up again if Arctic summers keep getting longer and warmer. Yep, you heard right. Zombie microbes. Great. These microbes have been stuck in permafrost, which is soil and ice that stays frozen solid year-round. The top layer melts a bit in the summer, but the really old stuff, those Ice Age microbes, are buried way deeper. They only thaw if things get really warm for months, not just a hot day or two. To study these microbes, the team went down to the permafrost research tunnel near Fairbanks in Alaska, a long underground hallway 50 feet below the surface, carved right into the ancient frozen ground. The tunnel stretches over 350 feet and lets scientists literally walk through thousands of years of frozen history. By the way, while checking out the walls, the researchers also spotted bones of mammoths and bison sticking out of the ice. One of the reasons why the researchers went to Alaska was to see how fast these ancient microbes could come back to life. Well, they were in for a surprise. These microbes don't need years, centuries, or magic spells to wake up. Just a couple of months of warm weather. Once they're awake, they start doing their microbe stuff, which includes pumping out greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane. And that's bad news, because those gases warm the planet even more. This melts more permafrost, which wakes up more microbes, which releases more gas. You get it. Basically, it's a nasty climate loop. Anyway, when scientists went down into the frozen tunnel to grab chunks of super old permafrost, the first thing they noticed was the awful smell. It wasn't just the stench of an old basement. It was something has been frozen for thousands of years and is finally waking up bad. Weirdly, microbiologists were happy. Such a smell is actually a good sign for them because it usually means tiny creatures, microbes, are still around. Back in the lab, the team soaked the frozen samples in the water that had a special kind of heavy hydrogen inside it. This helped them track what the microbes were doing later. Then they put the samples into fridges at 3 different temperatures: cold, kinda cold, and not too cold, to copy what future Arctic summers might feel like if the warming continues. For the first month, almost nothing happened. Even the warmer samples barely changed. Only a tiny number of microbes started waking up. Basically, a microscopic trickle of activity. But a few months later, things got more exciting. Thanks to the heavy water, scientists could watch how much of it the microbes used to build their cell membranes. It helped them figure out that the old microbes were making special fatty molecules that might help them stay alive in freezing conditions. By the 6-month mark, the samples that were stored at the warmer temperatures had transformed completely. They became more active and started forming little slime layers. The scientists could actually see these layers even without a microscope. The whole community of microbes wasn't super diverse, but those that were active behaved just like modern microbes that live in unfrozen soil today. In short, those ancient microbes were definitely alive and got pretty energetic once the temperatures were warm enough. This matters a lot for the Arctic and for the whole planet because these microbes survive by eating old organic material trapped in the permafrost. When they eat, they release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, and the Arctic is warming faster than any other part of Earth. It means that the deep frozen layers might stay warm long enough for huge numbers of ancient microbes to wake up and start pumping out gas. Right now, northern permafrost holds about twice as much carbon as the entire atmosphere. If a lot of that carbon gets released, it could speed up the warming of our planet. It can lead to dramatic consequences, setting off a whole chain of huge changes and affecting basically everything on Earth. Extreme weather will start happening more often. Stronger hurricanes, heavier rainstorms, longer heat waves, bigger wildfires. The oceans will rise too, which can flood coastlines and put towns and cities at risk. Animals, plants, and entire ecosystems can get thrown out of balance, with some species struggling to survive and food chains breaking down. People all over the world will have to deal with crop failures, water shortages, and damaged homes or infrastructure. Let's get back to our zombie microbes. The thing is, the study only looked at them in one place in Alaska, but there's a massive amount of permafrost all over the world, in Alaska, Canada, Siberia, and many other places. and microbes in different regions might behave differently as things warm up. Scientists still have tons of work to do to figure out what's coming next. I bet you're questioning yourself. Could ancient viruses infect us? Well, most of the ancient microbes frozen in permafrost are totally harmless. They're like old bacteria that only care about messing with other tiny organisms in the dirt. But scientists worry that a few of these frozen germs might be the kind that can infect people, animals, or plants. And if that happened, our bodies probably wouldn't recognize them at all, because they've been frozen since mammoths existed. Basically, there's no immune system cheat codes for us. The risks of this happening grow for a number of reasons. For one thing, the Arctic is warming almost 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Longer summers plus hotter temperatures mean more permafrost melting. So, more ancient stuff is waking up. Plus, people might start digging more around there. Companies will mine more, drill for oil, and ships can travel new routes. All this activity tears open ground that used to stay frozen solid. This increases the chance that someone or something comes across some ancient germ that just woke up. What would actually happen then? We might run into different zoonotic diseases, basically germs that jump from animals to humans. This already happened once. Thawed reindeer carcasses released anthrax, a rare and serious illness which then infected people and animals. Luckily, we do know how to treat anthrax. But what if something even older wakes up? Besides, our immune system might have zero defense. If a virus hasn't been around for tens of thousands of years, humans today would be like, what is that thing? No antibodies, no memories of it, nothing. But the scariest part is that we don't know what's hiding down there. Scientists think permafrost might be storing trillions of frozen microbes, many of which we've never seen before. Some might be boring, and some might be super dangerous. So what if one such virus finally thawed out? The world would be dealing with a disaster no one has ever seen before. This wouldn't look like a normal outbreak. It would feel more like something out of a horror movie. First, the virus would be totally new and our immune systems definitely wouldn't recognize it. That means the virus would spread crazy fast, jumping from person to person. No one would know what to expect. It could cause weird illnesses, sudden fevers, or even something way more dangerous. Stuff as scary as the diseases people faced in old times. Scientists digging in permafrost already look for traces of those ancient diseases, so it's not impossible. Once it escapes, the virus wouldn't stay local for long. With people traveling everywhere and companies rushing into the warming Arctic for mining and shipping, the infection could go from one small Arctic village to major cities all over the world within days. Hospitals would fill up instantly and doctors and nurses would run out of supplies. Businesses would shut down. Food supplies could crash if the virus hit farm animals or crops. Shipping and travel could freeze completely. Fear and panic would spread around the globe almost as fast as the virus itself. There'd be no vaccine and no cure, because no one has ever seen this virus before. Scientists would have to start from zero. In short, a zombie virus outbreak would be totally unpredictable, and the modern world is certainly not ready for it. If you had landed on Earth a really long time ago, about 1.5 billion years in the past, you wouldn't have recognized our planet. At that time, all the land was stuck together in one giant supercontinent called Nuna, which was surrounded by an endless ocean. But if you had stuck around, you would have witnessed a planetary-scale disaster, Nuna falling apart. But the most amazing thing is that apparently, when Nuna started breaking apart, it kicked off changes that made Earth a much better place for life. Scientists used to call this part of Earth's history the boring billion. It lasted from about 1.8 billion to 800 million years ago. Not much seemed to happen during that time, hence the name. No big climate changes, no bizarre life forms, and nothing very dramatic. Turns out the name isn't very fair. Things may have looked calm on the surface, but underneath, Earth was changing a lot. Continents were moving, splitting apart, and coming back together. Two massive supercontinents, Nuna and later Rodinia, formed and broke up during this time. When Nuna began to break apart, huge cracks opened between the drifting land pieces. Water filled those spaces, creating shallow seas. Those seas were warmer, calmer, and had more oxygen than the deep oceans that existed before. And that might have changed everything. The new seas created friendlier conditions for life to grow and change. Scientists now think they may have helped early life become more complex. They looked back 1.8 billion years and rebuilt how Earth's tectonic plates moved over time. Plus, they tracked how carbon was stored inside the planet and released into the air. The researchers did this using a new advanced computer model that gave way more detail than they had ever had before. They found out that during the 350 million years of the so-called boring billion, the amount of shallow seas along the edges of continents doubled. Altogether, these coastlines stretched about 81,000 miles. That's more than 3 times around Earth at the equator. At the same time, subduction zones, places where one tectonic plate slides under another, actually got shorter as the continents shifted around. This is important because subduction zones are where a lot of volcanoes come from. When one plate sinks under another, seawater gets dragged deep into the Earth. That water helps rocks melt, creating magma. The magma rises, erupts as volcanoes, and releases gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So when there were fewer subduction zones, there were fewer volcanoes, and less carbon dioxide was pumped into the air. It went like this. The supercontinent Nuna broke apart, and it created lots of brand new ocean floors in young seas that didn't exist before. These new ocean floors pulled carbon dioxide out of the air. Seawater flowed into cracks in the ocean floor. When that happened, carbon got trapped in rocks, forming limestone. Over time, this process locked carbon away inside Earth instead of letting it stay in the atmosphere. With less carbon dioxide, Earth slowly cooled down. That cooler climate helped the new shallow seas become stable and rich in oxygen. Such calm, oxygen-filled environments are perfect for life to become more complex. Those huge shallow seas near the continents acted like safe nurseries for early life. They may have helped eukaryotes evolve faster. Eukaryotes are living things with complex cells. Cells that have parts inside them, like a nucleus that holds DNA. Every animal, plant, and fungus on Earth comes from these kinds of cells. So when eukaryotes appeared, it was a huge moment in the history of life. Scientists already knew that eukaryotes showed up during the boring billion because of fossils that are about 1 billion years old, but they didn't really know why this happened at that time. Now, scientists want to find better preserved early eukaryote fossils to learn exactly how complex life first evolved. Life on Earth started over 3 billion years ago. It began with tiny, simple microbes and slowly turned into a huge variety of living things. We still don't have a clear answer about how living things came out of that early primordial soup, but even though there's no final answer yet, scientists have come up with several theories to try to explain how life on Earth may have started. Some scientists think lightning helped start life on Earth. The idea is pretty simple. Lightning is a powerful spark, and sparks can cause chemical reactions. In a famous experiment from 1952, scientists showed that electric sparks could turn simple gases like water vapor and methane into amino acids and sugars, which are basic building blocks of life. This suggested that lightning in early Earth storms might have helped create the first life ingredients. But later research showed Earth's early air wasn't exactly like the experiment. Still, some scientists think volcanic clouds could have had the right gases and lots of lightning, making this process possible. Other experts think life may have started on clay. One researcher suggested that tiny clay crystals could grow and stick together in patterns. As they did, they could trap simple molecules and line them up in organized ways. Think of clay as a kind of early organizer. Today, DNA tells molecules how to line up and work together. But what if clay had been doing a similar job before DNA even existed? It could be helping molecules arrange themselves until they eventually learned to organize on their own. This idea was interesting and got a lot of attention, but most scientists don't fully accept it yet. Another popular theory is that life started at deep-sea vents on the ocean floor. These vents are cracks in Earth's crust where super hot water shoots out from deep inside the planet. As the water rises, it picks up important chemicals like carbon and hydrogen, which are key ingredients for life. The vents are full of tiny rock spaces where these chemicals could collect, mix, and react. The rocks may have helped speed up these reactions. Even today, deep-sea vents house rich ecosystems, even though it's dark there and the whole environment is kinda extreme. Scientists are still studying this idea. In 2019, researchers even created early life-like structures in lab conditions similar to these vents. Such an experiment showed that this theory could really work. Another idea is that life may have started under ice. Scientists believe Earth's oceans might have been covered in ice around 3 billion years ago. Sounds pretty severe, right? But the cold may have actually helped life get started. Many of the chemical building blocks of life, like simple amino acids, are more stable at low temperatures. In warmer water, these molecules break down quickly and are spread far apart. But when water freezes, it pushes those molecules together, increasing their concentration. This crowding makes chemical reactions more likely. So, let's say the molecules were packed closer together and were breaking down more slowly. In this case, they had more chances to link up and form more complex structures. Ice may have also acted like a protective blanket. It could shield the water from harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun and from damage caused by meteor impacts. Another idea is that life didn't start on Earth at all. This theory is called panspermia, and it suggests that life came from space. Scientists know that big asteroid impacts can blast rocks off of planets. For example, rocks from Mars have been knocked into space before, and some of them ended up on Earth. Some researchers think tiny microbes might have survived inside space rocks during the journey. If that's true, life here could have started thanks to visitors from Mars or some other cosmic world. Others go even further and suggest that life could have traveled on comets or space dust from completely different star systems, hitching a ride across the galaxy. At the same time, even if panspermia is real, it doesn't fully solve the mystery. It just moves the question somewhere else. Instead of asking how life began on Earth, we'd need to ask, how did life begin anywhere in the universe?